The cold November wind cut through Detective James Reeves' jacket as he stood at the edge of the Little Patuxent River. Yellow police tape fluttered in the breeze, marking off the area where Joyce Malecki's body had been discovered just hours earlier. The 20-year-old's pale form had been pulled from the frigid waters that morning by two fishermen, her blue eyes staring vacantly at the gray Maryland sky. Reeves pulled his coat tighter, watching his breath form clouds in the air. He'd been with the Baltimore PD for 15 years, but cases involving young women still hit him hardest. Joyce had been missing for only 2 days, reported missing after failing to return from a simple shopping trip to the local mall. Now she lay on the riverbank, carefully covered by a sheet as the medical examiner completed her preliminary examination. Strangulation, blunt force trauma to the head, multiple stab wounds, Dr. Sarah Chin said, standing and removing her gloves with a snap. Sexual assault likely. We'll know more after the autopsy. Reeves nodded, making notes in his small leather-bound notebook. Time of death. Based on body temperature and decomposition, I'd estimate between 24 to 36 hours ago. Sometime last night or early this morning. The detective looked around at the isolated stretch of riverbank, situated on the edges of Fort Meade. Why here, he muttered, more to himself than to Dr. Chin. This isn't exactly a high-traffic area. Someone who knows the area, perhaps, offered Officer Martinez, who had been first on the scene. Maybe military personnel. We are on the edge of Fort Meade after all. Reeves considered this, staring at the muddy ground around them. Any signs of a struggle here? None that we've found, Martinez replied. Looks like she was killed elsewhere and dumped here. Killer probably figured the river would wash away evidence, Reeves said. Let's get a team to search half a mile in each direction. And I want to know everywhere Joyce went before she disappeared. Back at the precinct, Reeves pinned Joyce's photo to the investigation board. She smiled back at him, young, pretty, full of life, in a picture her parents had provided. Next to it, he placed a map marking key locations: her home, the mall where she was last seen, and the riverbank where her body was discovered. What do we know about her? Asked Captain Wilson, entering the room with a cup of coffee. Joyce Malecki, 20 years old. Lived with her parents and younger brother in Lansdowne. Worked as a secretary at a local manufacturing company. Disappeared Tuesday after going shopping at Glen Burnie Mall. Her car was found in the parking lot, bags inside. No signs of struggle. Reeves took a sip from his own cup, grimacing at the bitter taste. By all accounts, a normal young woman. Religious, active in her church. No known enemies or troubles. Boyfriend? None currently, according to her parents. Broke up with someone a few months back. Thomas Kelly. We're bringing him in for questioning. Wilson nodded. Keep me posted. The press is already calling. Young woman murdered right before the holidays, they're going to be all over this. Reeves spent the next hour reviewing witness statements from mall shoppers and employees. No one remembered seeing Joyce after around 6:30 p.m. when a store clerk recalled her purchasing a small gift, a tie for her father's upcoming birthday. There was nothing unusual about her demeanor, nothing to suggest she knew what was coming. The door opened, and Detective Lorna Washington entered, carrying a file folder. Joyce's autopsy report just came in, she said, her expression grim as she handed it to Reeves. He flipped it open, scanning the contents. Cause of death, strangulation. But she was stabbed multiple times first. And sexually assaulted, as we suspected. There's more, Washington said. The Me found something unusual. Look at page 3. Reeves turned to the page and frowned. Religious medallion fragments. What does that mean? Tiny metal fragments were embedded in the wounds on her back. Dr. Chin thinks they might be from a religious medal that broke during the attack. Catholic, possibly. Joyce was Catholic, Reeves noted, thinking. Could it have been her own? Her parents said she wasn't wearing any jewelry when she went shopping that day. Reeves stood up, walking back to the board. So our killer might be religious, or at least familiar with religious symbols. Maybe someone from her church. Washington shrugged. Worth looking into. Also, I've been checking on similar cases in the area. There's nothing with this exact MO, but there was a missing persons report filed yesterday for a nun from Western High School. Sister Catherine Sesnick. Disappeared after going shopping. Another woman vanishing after shopping. Reeves raised an eyebrow. That's one hell of a coincidence. Could be unrelated, Washington cautioned. But two Catholic women disappearing within days of each other. Let's not jump to conclusions, but keep that on our radar. What about Joyce's ex-boyfriend? Thomas Kelly. He's in the interrogation room now. 22, works at his father's auto shop. Claims he was working late the night Joyce disappeared. Let's see if his story checks out. In the small, windowless interrogation room, Thomas Kelly sat nervously fidgeting with a paper cup. He was a good-looking young man with dark hair and a mechanic's calloused hands, currently smudged with traces of engine grease he hadn't quite managed to scrub away. I don't understand why I'm here, he said as Reeves entered. I already told the other detective, I had nothing to do with what happened to Joyce. Just routine questioning, Mr. Kelly, Reeves said, taking a seat across from him. You and Joyce dated for how long? About 8 months. We broke up in August. Who ended it? Thomas looked down at his hands. She did. And how did that make you feel? Bad, obviously, he snapped, then softened his tone. Look, I was upset, sure. I really cared about her. But it was mutual, kind of. We were growing apart. She was really involved with her church, wanted me to go more often. I'm not much of a religious guy. Where were you Tuesday night between 6 p.m. and midnight? At the shop, like I said. We had 3 cars that needed to be finished by morning. Dad can confirm it. So can Mike, our other mechanic. And you haven't seen or spoken to Joyce since the breakup? Thomas hesitated, just long enough for Reeves to notice. Not really. I mean, we ran into each other at a coffee shop about a month ago. Just said hello, that's it. Did Joyce ever mention anyone who made her uncomfortable? Anyone who showed too much interest in her? Thomas thought for a moment. There was this one guy at her church. Older guy, always hanging around the young women. Joyce said he gave her the creeps sometimes, but I don't know his name. Reeves made a note. Anything else you can tell me about Joyce? Her habits, her friends, places she frequented? She was pretty predictable. Work, church, home. Sometimes movies with her girlfriends. She liked to shop at that mall because her brother worked at the record store there. Thomas paused. Have you talked to Father Magnus? He was pretty close with Joyce. Father Magnus? The priest at her church. St. Clement's, I think. Joyce mentioned him a lot. Said he was a mentor to her. Later that afternoon, Reeves and Washington pulled up to St. Clement's Catholic Church, a modest brick building with stained glass windows depicting saints looking down upon the faithful. Inside, the church was dim and quiet, smelling of incense and candle wax. A few parishioners knelt in prayer, and an elderly man polished the wooden pews. Can I help you? Asked a soft voice. A priest in his 50s approached, his expression curious but welcoming. Father Magnus? Reeves asked, showing his badge. I'm Detective Reeves, and this is Detective Washington. We'd like to ask you some questions about Joyce Malecki. The priest's face fell. Of course. Such a tragedy. She was a wonderful young woman, devoted to her faith. He led them to a small office off the main sanctuary. Please, sit. We understand you were close with Joyce, Washington said once they were seated. I was her confessor, Father Magnus replied. She attended Mass regularly and helped with our youth programs. When did you last see her? Reeves asked. Sunday service. She seemed happy, normal. The priest folded his hands on the desk. I still can't believe she's gone. Did Joyce ever mention anyone who bothered her? Anyone who paid her unwanted attention? Father Magnus frowned slightly. She was a beautiful young woman. I'm sure she attracted attention. But she never mentioned any specific concerns to me. What about other members of the church? Was there anyone who showed particular interest in her? A flicker of something, hesitation. Concern, crossed the priest's face. Not that I recall. Though our groundskeeper, Mr. Kowalski, often chatted with her. He's quite harmless, though, an elderly gentleman. We'd like a list of all church personnel and regular attendees, Washington said. Especially anyone who worked closely with Joyce. Of course, Father Magnus agreed, but Reeves noted the slight tightening of his jaw. Though I must remind you that certain communications are privileged. The sanctity of confession. We understand the limitations, Reeves interrupted. But a young woman is dead, Father. Any information you can provide could help us find her killer. As they were leaving, Reeves noticed a bulletin board with church announcements. Among them was a flyer for a religious retreat the previous month, with a photo showing Joyce and several other young people, including a tall man in clerical attire who wasn't Father Magnus. Who's this? Reeves asked, pointing to the man. Father Magnus glanced at the photo. That's Father Joseph Maskell. He's not assigned to this parish. He's the chaplain at Archbishop Keogh High School, but he sometimes assists with youth retreats. Reeves made a mental note of the name. Something about the way Father Magnus had mentioned it, too casually, perhaps, raised his internal alarm. Back in the car, Washington looked thoughtful. The priest seemed nervous. Yes, Reeves agreed. And I want to know more about this Father Maskell. As they drove away, Reeves couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just slipped through his fingers, some crucial detail that hovered just beyond his grasp. The case was growing more complex by the hour, with potential connections to the church, another missing woman, and too many unanswered questions. The following morning brought a grim discovery. Sister Catherine Cessnick's body had been found in a remote area, not far from where Joyce had been discovered. Like Joyce, she had been killed violently. Two young Catholic women, both killed within days of each other, Reeves said, adding Sister Catherine's photo to the board. This can't be a coincidence. The cases are being handled separately, Captain Wilson reminded him. Sister Catherine's murder is Baltimore County's jurisdiction. Joyce's is ours, with the FBI consulting since her body was found on federal property. But the connections are obvious, Washington argued. Both victims disappeared after shopping. Both were Catholic. Both bodies were dumped in isolated areas. Wilson sighed. I'll reach out to the county and see if we can coordinate. But focus on Joyce for now. What's your next step? I want to look deeper into the church angle, Reeves said. Joyce was heavily involved with her parish, and this other priest, Father Maskell, keeps coming up in conversations with people who knew her. Later that day, Reeves interviewed Joyce's brother, Michael Malecki, at the family home. The house was somber, with relatives coming and going, bringing casseroles and offering condolences. Michael, just 18, looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. I should have picked her up, he said, his voice hollow. She mentioned she might need a ride home from the mall, but I had a date. This isn't your fault, Reeves assured him. Can you think of anyone who might have wanted to hurt your sister? Michael shook his head. Everyone loved Joyce. She was kind to everyone. What about at church? Any relationships there we should know about? The young man hesitated. There was something. Joyce seemed different after the retreat last month. More withdrawn. When I asked what was wrong, she just said she was dealing with adult matters and changed the subject. Did she mention Father Maskell? Michael's eyes widened slightly. How did you know about him? Joyce said he was helping her with a spiritual issue. I only met him once, when he gave her a ride home from youth group. There was something. I don't know. Something off about him. Off how? The way he looked at her. It wasn't appropriate. Michael looked down. I told Joyce, but she said I was imagining things. Said he was just concerned about her spiritual welfare. Reeves made more notes. Anything else you can remember? Any detail might help. Michael thought for a moment. A few days before she disappeared, I overheard her on the phone. She sounded upset, saying something like, "You can't keep doing this, and I'll tell someone." When I asked who it was, she just said it was church business. A new lead. Reeves thanked Michael and promised to stay in touch. Outside, he called Washington from the car. I need everything you can find on Father Joseph Maskell, he said. And check phone records from the Malecki house for the week before Joyce disappeared. I want to know who she was talking to. The investigation intensified over the next few days. Joyce's funeral was held, attended by hundreds of mourners, including Father Magnus. Reeves noticed Father Maskell was conspicuously absent. A breakthrough came when phone records showed multiple calls between Joyce and Archbishop Keogh High School, where Father Maskell served as chaplain. Additionally, a witness came forward, a clerk from a different store at the mall who remembered seeing Joyce talking to a man in dark clothing the evening she disappeared. Though the description was vague, it could have been a priest in civilian clothes. We need to interview Maskell, Reeves insisted during the next briefing. He's lawyered up, Washington responded. Archdiocese is closing ranks. They've issued a statement saying he barely knew Joyce and was in Washington, D.C. the night she disappeared, attending a conference with several other priests who can vouch for him. I don't buy it, Reeves said. There are too many connections. And now I'm hearing rumors from other sources about complaints against Maskell from students at Keogh. Nothing official, but whispers of inappropriate behavior. Captain Wilson frowned. That's thin, Reeves. We need solid evidence, not rumors, especially when dealing with the church. Then let me build the case. I need more time. But time was running out. Pressure mounted to make an arrest, with the press questioning police competence. The FBI's involvement complicated matters further, with jurisdictional disputes and competing theories about the killer. Thomas Kelly's alibi checked out, eliminating him as a suspect. The religious medallion fragments remained a mystery, they matched no jewelry Joyce owned, according to her family. As December arrived, the case grew colder along with the weather. Reeves worked tirelessly, interviewing more of Joyce's friends, church members, and co-workers. A picture began to emerge of a young woman who may have known something troubling, perhaps about someone in a position of power. Then came another twist, an anonymous call to the precinct from a woman claiming to be a former student at Keogh. Joyce knew about Father Maskell, the trembling voice said. She was going to expose him. There are others, girls he hurt. Joyce found out somehow. Before Reeves could get more information, the caller hung up. Attempts to trace the call led nowhere. The detective stared at his investigation board late one night, connecting threads between the evidence they had. If Joyce had discovered something about Father Maskell, something worth killing for, where was the proof? And how did it connect to Sister Catherine's murder? He looked again at the autopsy report, focusing on the religious medallion fragments. An idea struck him, and he called Dr. Chen at home. Those fragments, he said when she answered. You said they were from a Catholic medal. Could you tell which saint? I'd have to compare them to known designs, she replied, sounding intrigued. Why? Just a hunch. How quickly can you check? 2 days later, Dr. Chen confirmed the fragments likely came from a St. Michael medal, patron saint of police officers and the military. It wasn't Joyce's, she wore Street Cecilia, patron of musicians. The revelation added another puzzling piece to the mystery. As Reeves dug deeper, he uncovered more connections between Father Maskell, Joyce, and Sister Catherine. Both women had ties to Keogh High School. Joyce had volunteered there, and Sister Catherine had taught there until recently. What had they known? What had they discovered? Despite mounting circumstantial evidence, solid proof remained elusive. The Archdiocese continued to protect Father Maskell, and without direct evidence linking him to the crime scene, an arrest warrant remained out of reach. The case would eventually go cold, joining thousands of others in the unsolved files. Years would pass, with periodic reviews bringing no new conclusions. Reeves would retire still haunted by Joyce's smile in that photograph, and by the truth he believed was buried beneath layers of power, protection, and time. Decades later, as a new generation of investigators looked into the connected cases, Joyce Malecki's murder would remain officially unsolved. But among those who had worked the case, who had traced the threads and heard the whispers, there remained the unshakable belief that the killer had walked free among them, protected by his collar and the institution that valued its reputation above justice for a young woman who had simply gone shopping one November day in 1969. In December 2023, advances in DNA technology would prompt the FBI to exhume Joyce's body, seeking evidence that earlier methods couldn't detect. As her remains were carefully raised from the earth, the questions that had surrounded her death for over 50 years rose with them. Who silenced Joyce Malecki? What had she known? And would justice, so long delayed, ever be served? The answers, like Joyce herself, remained buried, waiting for the right detective, the right technology, or the right witness to finally bring them into the light.